your management reviews feel like a waste of time, they probably are. What if I told you most teams are doing them completely wrong and it's costing them decisions, direction, and executive buy-in? Okay, Martin, so what is the secret behind powerful reviews?
Okay, well, I think maybe the obvious. That sounds like a strange thing to say, but I guess that the secret really is to actually review your system rather than actually hold which is what most people do, like a sit down and have a meeting. I think the people read the management review clause as sit down and have a meeting rather than actually review your system. I think that's kind of one of the biggest areas that gets missed, or maybe I think that's probably one of the biggest things, Mike, that we've kind of I've noticed over the years of doing this.
Yeah, because I think, well, obviously, when I go and do audits, we have basically when we go to the management review section, everyone just presents a load of minutes to me. That's basically
Yeah,
what it is,
yeah,
isn't it?
quite
And
often.
there
Yeah,
we go, we've done our management review. Okay.
that's it. And it's I think as well, it's kind of, and they vary. I've been presented with like sort of one page, kind of just like literally like kind of yes nos through to kind of quite detailed kind of sort of transcripts, if you like, the multiple pages. But I think that, yeah, like I say, the secret in it, if you like, is that word of review, and it's not just a case of sit down and have a management review once a year before the audit, or after your internal audit, or whatever it may be. It can be considered as part of a continual kind of process, really. And one of the things I say to clients when we're going into is say, don't feel like you could just present me with a meeting that you've had. And I say to them, what do you do throughout the year? Kind of what meetings do you have, or what points do you interact, and with your workers, the management team, and so on, and get them to kind of tell me, and then sort of interpret it that way. So look at what's already happening rather than just producing a set of minutes that kind of answers a set of inputs or agenda items. So yes, very common though just to get like you say, a set of minutes, which isn't necessarily wrong, but maybe not the best way of kind of reviewing your system. It can be I guess a sit down meeting can be a good kind of means of forum for consolidating ideas and actions and those kinds of things. But the idea of reviewing your system, I think, could be considered maybe more of a continual kind of thing that the organisation does as part and parcel of its day to day system operation.
So
Definitely.
why do we have to do it? What's sort of the purpose of management reviews?
I think,
Not just because what the standard says. What's the
yeah,
actual? The standard says it, so I'll do it. What's the
you've
actual
got to do it,
purpose of
yeah.
it?
And I think that's kind of the thing. People say, "Oh, I've got to do that," rather than actually thinking, actually, why do I need to do it? And it's when you look at, I mean, when you look at kind of what it's asking for, it's fundamentally about like the adequacy and effectiveness of your system. That's the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of your system. Those kind of three words, kind of, suitable, fit for purpose, adequate, achieving, what it needs to achieve, and effective in, getting the intended results of your system. And it's and I think people kind of just need to keep it as simple as that, kind of rather than just generating something to show auditors. Got to get it as something that can be value added to the business. And I think it's one of the other things that gets kind of continually missed is the standard gives you, or they all give you kind of a set agenda essentially, kind of in terms of the inputs, and it's all prescribed there in the standard for you. And that's kind of, if you like, maybe potentially like the easier part of it. I think maybe the bit that sometimes gets missed, through auditors included, Mike, is the outputs of the process, and that the outputs of the process don't necessarily mean, like we say, a set of minutes. It's more about decisions and actions and things that can affect the business and the system ultimately. That's kind of where it's heading.
Yeah, it's the output of the process that's the important bit, isn't it? Really, how you actually get there is
Yeah,
irrelevant.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So
and I think it's just that.
I
Go
was
on,
going to
sorry.
say, what's typical management review then that we see?
Typical
Probably
for
nine
me would
times
be
out of
kind of
10. Yeah, go on.
9 times out of 10, it's usually kind of like the person that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, sitting with maybe one or two other people, a consultant maybe if they're involved, which is absolutely fine. But and then just kind of going through a set of kind of preset agenda items, that largely align with the standard, not always. And then kind of usually just kind of a statement, a line. It can be sometimes even just a one-word answer, kind of are resources effective? Yes. And you think to yourself, well, it's not necessarily wrong, but it's kind of, is it giving you kind of like, the detail that you might need or expect? It's kind of, it's almost like I use this phrase a lot and it's a bit naff, but it's kind of like your maths homework, kind of showing you answers, showing your working, sorry, to support your answers. If you're saying something's okay, kind of based upon what, and is there something to be had behind that, and kind of, and I think the, typical kind of reviews are, usually kind of pretty succinct, kind of short and not a lot of information. But I think that's not necessarily an issue because that can be used as a means for auditors to then kind of maybe go off on different tangents. Like we don't rely on a set of minutes as evidence of a review process as part of the auditing. We're expected to go off in different directions and talk and interact. But obviously, what we would be interested in is kind of the decisions and outputs that have come and how those actions and outputs are subsequently kind of fed into your management system and acted upon essentially. If there's decisions being made, okay, well, how do they get communicated? So it's not just a set of minutes. Oh, good, done that. Okay, put it in the folder and away we go, kind of thing. It should be a live kind of process, very
Yeah,
much so.
yeah, everyone leaves it to sort of the week, the 2 weeks before we go in, don't they?
Always.
It's just like, oh, you've just done it. Yeah, you just thought you had to do it. But yeah, do it middle of the year, or like you say, it's ongoing, do it monthly and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I say to people, I say, what do you do? Like, do you have like board meetings? Do you have kind of staff meetings, progress? Obviously, I think the thing to remember within the standard talks about top management shall review the system, which is obviously a key part of it. But it doesn't necessarily mean kind of exclusively. It can obviously you can get people involved and and use inputs from other meetings or outputs from other meetings to feed into the review process. So it may be kind of various, kind of organisations, communications stages at various stages throughout what they do, and it might be an idea of just consolidating those into a review part of the review process, not necessarily in one go. Because a sales mic, all the time, you trying to summon when you're reviewing something at the end of the year. Say you're reviewing something, at the end of the calendar year, and you're trying to remember what happened in February. It's kind of pretty hard going, and it's kind of what was that? Oh, we said something there, did we? Okay, and it's kind of just it can be difficult to if you leave things until the end of the year or end of a period. It can be pretty hard going to remember what everyone was supposed to be doing, so
Yeah.
what everyone agreed to. And it's easier for people to duck out as well. If it's a long time ago, they can say, well, I don't remember then being asked to do that, so.
Yeah, I get quite a lot of organisations that have sort of weekly, some have daily, some have monthly meetings, and they cover a lot of the topics that they should be discussing: resources, how suppliers performing, and then they feel like they've got to sit down once a year before we go in and just do another meeting. That's kind of like, what's the point of that one? You've covered it
Yeah, that's
throughout
the
the
ISO.
year.
Oh,
You've used it. I can see you've been reviewing the system.
yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of like, oh, let's have ISO management review. And that's kind of, I guess that's kind of one of the traps that people can fall into in a lot of elements of their management system. It's kind of that's our ISO management review, but this is our business. If this is our business review, and you say, oh, there's our management review, and you start asking questions, and they say, oh yeah, we do like strategic review quarterly. We have this and that and the other things. Well, let's have a look at that then. Kind of don't make a distinction. Don't make a distinction between an ISO review, if you like, and things that you already do. And I think that can be one of the tricks of a management system, if you want to call it that. It's just working smart with what you've got and the information and the processes that you've already got, but just making sure that's consolidated and obviously considering the things that the standard asks you to consider, but not exclusively embed it in parts of what you're doing. So
Yeah, because what the standard actually asks you from an evidence perspective is actually quite small, isn't it? The outputs. I think it's like obviously the standards vary very slightly, different standards, but in 9001, I think it's like 4 key bits, isn't it? Is the output.
that's right. Yeah.
Technically, that's all you need to demonstrate as an output, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you're right. So yeah, 9001 in particular was just three kind of, but used again, it's what the outputs of the management review shall include like the decisions and actions related to. For 9001, it's opportunities for improvement and resources and changes. Interesting thing I noticed just as part and parcel of preparing for this and reviewing the standards is it goes to show you don't really know everything until you read it. Always have the standards open, particularly under environmental and health and safety systems. I don't know what it would be under maybe the aerospace. We can talk about that, but certainly from an environmental and health and safety perspective, there's some real kind of heavy, some kind of like really kind of important aspects of the output process that it asks you to talk about, including things about opportunities about improving the integration of the system with other business processes and implications for like kind of strategic direction of the organization. So quite kind of, they're not kind of wishy-washy things. It's kind of like they're quite kind of chunky, saying like, okay, if you're operating a health and safety and environmental and quality system, it's not just about having something to show the auditor. It's about kind of, these are decisions that affect the business, the people that work in it, and our performance and our, and the way we're perceived as a business. So it really is hugely important. It goes back to the first point. Don't just sit down and have a meeting. make sure you review your system, that it's adequate, effective, and suitable for what you're trying to achieve. That's the key thing. It really is, and it sounds daunting, but the reality is, yourself, Mike, people will be doing this, and it's just kind of just crystallizing it and forming it into a process that's happening and is controlled, and the right people are involved, and indeed it's evidenced in one form or another. So yeah,
So how could
definitely.
they evidence it? So if they're not going to do a meeting,
Mhm.
take minutes as such, how could they demonstrate it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, obviously, minutes is kind of like the default way, but that's kind of not necessarily always effective. I mean, I've seen various people record actions in there, kind of. Sometimes people have actions logs. They have kind of CRMs that they work with, various software things that go along. There's various ways that people kind of choose to kind of there can be various tasks. There's loads of things of software nowadays in terms of task systems and allocations and so on, and it doesn't necessarily need to be like a load of words. It can be generated by information that's presented to the workforce or whoever it may be, and what the outputs can not necessarily maybe actually lead into inputs into other processes. So it may be kind of the outputs of the overall review might actually kind of form an input into strategic planning or financial planning or whatever it may be. And I think that's the thing. We're more than happy as auditors to accept various forms of information. Over the years, the idea of just sitting in front of a folder, opening through it, and going through a big reams of paper, or there it all is, happy days, see you later, kind of thing. We're kind of very prepared now, and indeed like it when we're kind of getting asked to kind of interact with the system more and the business. I think yeah, ways of evidencing that, yeah, obviously documentation certainly another system, but also that can be evidenced via means of us sort of interviewing other people, and getting involved. And that action was allocated to that person, that department. We can say, okay, we can go and talk to them and evidence it in actual actions, and outputs and decisions may result in actual changes to kind of infrastructure and work processes. So we may go and see how those things have actually kind of been materialised and put through the system. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
suppose you could do a business plan, can't you, off the back of it that highlights resource needs or something like that, couldn't you? It shows you've reviewed it and you've identified those are the resources you need, or sort of
yeah,
I don't know, maybe a KPI on someone to get certain resources in place. That's another
yeah,
method. I think the
definitely,
in the aerospace quite a bit. I think it's general manufacturing, but they have daily production meetings quite often. And they've got a big whiteboard or something that they're drawing on, and they've got key things. Where are we on the deliveries for raw materials, things like that? What contracts have we got coming up? Where are people being assigned that day? That's all evidence of management reviewing, and we attend them. And that's part of the evidence that, well, this is what you do, and I can see it on the
yeah,
whiteboard where you're scribbling around each day. We've attended it. Well, yeah, that's good evidence for me. I think
definitely, yeah,
the one that got my head going once was a client we used to do in America that you'll remember, but their other site. Obviously, I won't say who it was. And their management review was done every day, and they had a massive whiteboard in their staff canteen, and they had magnetic, like the acetane things, or acetote, I should say.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Yep. And every day they just went for each thing, and a different person was responsible for each one of the management
Mm,
team. And they literally
mm.
went, it's sort of a 15-minute thing, but it was like, right, where are we with the resources and things like that? And it was just, and they would just update it every day. And that was their
Right, okay,
record. So they
yeah,
handwrite notes on it and things like that. I thought it was brilliant because it's actually being used. It's not being done for our benefit. They didn't have
yeah, that's it.
minutes. They didn't produce them. They basically that's how it is, and that's what we're doing, and we're actually using this as a mechanism to move the business forward.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, and it's I don't know the key things there. Just I know, and in the health and safety kind of standard, it says that relevant outputs shall go out to kind of workers or their representatives and so on. But there's no, I know that's kind of exclusive in terms of words in from a 45,001 perspective. But there's no reason why elements of the output. So the management review process couldn't or shouldn't be communicated out. Obviously there may be some things that are sensitive and commercially in confidence and so on. But there's no reason why these are just kind of a piece of paper sitting in a folder. It kind of get people involved and kind of let them know what's being decided, because it can also help to got to get everyone involved in everything, big committees around everything. But if people are involved in the process and kind of can see what's happening and they're involved in the decision making, then it can ultimately it makes it much harder for them to kind of resist it when they're actually asked to do it. So it's kind of actually kind of, well, you're part of that review process, and may not be appropriate at every stage. There may be certain things within the management review that are exclusive to the senior leadership team or top management and so on. But there's no reason why certain elements of it shouldn't, and indeed the standards kind of ask for that. It's a good way of pushing the information. It's not just about gathering information; it's pushing the information out as well and giving the feedback. What's going on out there?
One thing I don't like though, when people do minutes, and if you choose minutes, that's fine. Like I say, it's probably 90% of the organisations, is they'll have sort of the category internal audits, yes, done, all up to date. Non-conformances, none outstanding. It's like, that's not really the purpose of it. You should be, well, how many audits are done? How many findings? Do we have any trends? Do we need to adjust our audit plan? Same thing with non-conformances. I'm more interested in, were there any trends in it? Not whether they're closed or open necessarily.
Yeah, sure.
We've had 50 findings internally raised. 50 of them were for grinding. Well, we've got a problem in grinding. What's the decision we're doing off the back of that? But again, you wouldn't wait a whole year to do that, would you?
No, exactly.
If
Yeah,
you
it
wait
shouldn't
a
be
whole year to suddenly go, hang on, we've got a bit of a problem here. Something's gone wrong.
kind of standing there watching it all happen. Oh, blimey, look at that look going over.
Yeah,
That's
look
no
at that.
good.
We haven't got our management review yet, but when we do in
Yeah,
3 months' time, I'm gonna
cool. Yeah,
discuss that.
we can do something about that when we're ready at the end of the year. So yeah, I
That
think that's the thing. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
that's the reality of it, is it? You're not going to wait
That is it, and
a
that's when it
year.
becomes. It's a bit like kind of. I suppose I know we're not talking about kind of internal audits and that kind of thing necessarily, but it is part of the. You could argue that it's all part of the review process, and it's kind of like, there's the internal audits done all in one go before the auditor comes in. There's your management review, yeah, all done like the day before, and you think to yourself like, it's just is it an effective process in terms of what we're asking, what the standards are looking for? Is it compliant? I suppose that's the difference. Is it compliant? Yes. Is it an effective way of doing it? Maybe not the best way. Obviously, I know there's different sizes and shapes of organisation. I know we've been into many over the years, from one person sitting in their front room, quite literally, which I know we've both done organisations like that, through to kind of big multi-site, multi-million pound dollar sort of organisation. So yes, everything has to be, one approach is not a fit all, certainly not, but I think the spirit and the intent of it, the standard is the standard. It asks for the same things whether you're one or many, and it's I think it's just getting your head around the intent of it, and ultimately, yes, talk about the things it's asking you to talk about, but get those outputs. I think that's kind of the real. It's one of the things I've kind of, even probably relatively recently, it's kind of looked to that actual output stage and say, what is actually being done here? What is happening? I think when you're one person on your own working from your front room, which is out there, what do we do now? Kind of, do I sit down and have a conversation with myself? I don't know how you feel about that, Mike, but it's kind of when you get that kind of question like, well, how do I review my own system? It's kind of, what do I do? But it's not about, I think that comes back to our point. It's not about having a meeting with yourself. It's about reviewing your system. That's the thing, because, you probably get a lot of disagreement if you meet with yourself, but, sometime,
Fire
probably
yourself.
won't, but we'll never come to a conclusion. But,
Yeah,
but I don't.
I do get that question quite a lot from solopreneurs and things like that. Oh, how do I do a management review? It's just me. Well, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Business plans, notes where they've thought about stuff, or some kind of evidence that they made some kind of decision to proceed with something. Yeah, it's like you say, you don't sit down and have a meeting with yourself.
And I think that's exactly it. That's kind of it. So yeah. So how do I review my own system, or how do I have a review with myself? And that's not what it's about. Or have a meeting, sorry, with myself. It's about that. It's reviewing your system. Is it? I think that's the key thing. Just looking at the words. Is the suitable. Is it adequate for what you're trying to achieve, and is it effective? I think that's the word that runs through the standard. You're looking for, is it effective? In trying to achieve your intended outcomes. Your objectives. Your customer focus. Your controls that you're trying to implement. So, but yeah, it does vary. There's an awful lot of variation out there. In terms, it's not fair to say that. I think it's not fair to say like there's bad management reviews or bad meetings. It's maybe just kind of like, it's maybe not always doing what the organisation does justice. Maybe that's the fair way of putting it, and kind of, say, getting
Yes.
that, yeah, getting that
Yeah,
point across and saying like, okay, we believe that you're doing it, and we can see obviously the business is functioning. We're here. You're working, you're making money, good willing, but it's ultimately it's like okay, but kind of just just get in the habit of of getting those things written down, and it's not just to show us. You show those things that are written down so that you can remind the relevant people, that you can remind yourself. Kind of that's what we decided. There's nothing worse than gathering loads of information and not necessarily kind of action in it in any way. I know it happens. Everyone's busy. But all the more reason to, you know, I think that's the thing as well. Just thinking as I'm kind of talking here, it's kind of do we need to change the system? Because it's like, well, we've been doing this, in this particular fashion. Is it the best way of doing it? I think that's. I know we've not maybe change is another thing for us to talk about another podcast, but it's people think, oh, we've got to carry on doing that because that's the way it was set up like 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago, and that's what we've always done it, and it's but don't need to be afraid of changing the whole thing.
yeah, we've always done
Certainly
it
not.
that way.
Yeah,
We
that's
love
it.
we love that, don't we?
Yeah, I've always done it that way. Yeah, always done it that way. But it can
Yeah,
be tough though. There's businesses out there, and people do see it as a bit of a challenge on their time and getting, particularly, I guess, top management together. It's like, oh, I've got to get these people together, and they've not got the time, and that can be a challenge as well. For organisations, saying like, okay, getting the senior leadership team together or top management team together, that could be a challenge as well. But
I think that's
unfortunately, the
when
standard.
you're better off breaking it down, aren't you?
Yeah,
You can have middle management and teams making decisions doing certain things, and then every now and then it flows up for the big oversight. They'll, like you say, they'll do a board meeting once a year or something where they can make those decisions. And I've seen that, and they don't want me to see the full minutes of a board meeting. Totally understand, because obviously
of
there's
course, yeah,
some sensitive stuff, but what they do is they do like snapshots out of it, or here's a section that where we've discussed that, and they just show me that, and okay, that's
yeah.
fine. You know,
I think that's the
don't
thing as
don't
well.
create a meeting for me.
Definitely not, no. And I think that's the thing. That's a good point actually. Kind of although the standards got these things that you shall talk about and so on. If you want to call them agenda items, that it calls them inputs as we all know into the process. But you don't doesn't mean you have to talk about them all in one go because it may be that it's not always appropriate to talk about maybe non-conformity is a bad example, but there may be certain things that come up on every meeting. There may be things that actually we're going to defer that for that's more relevant to that meeting or that frequency. And the standard's not explicit. It's kind of quite open in that regard to what's effective for you as a business. Make it the size and shape of review meeting, if you want to call it that suits you. The size and shape of what you are. You don't need to talk about everything all at once, all in one go. It's because could that be a long meeting, particularly some organisations. That could be a long old afternoon, as you well know. But it's people keeping people's attention for a period of time and what's relevant is key to the process.
Well, I suppose one of the inputs is review your policy, your quality policy or
Yeah,
environmental policy, whatever it is. Well, you could just sign it every year or something, couldn't you? And redate it. That's me
yeah,
reviewing it. It's
definitely,
don't,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's yeah. I think just think outside the box. I think really for
I think that's the
people.
thing. It's like so many things with it. It's easy to overthink. It's kind of like just if not with the policy itself, it's yes, it's like it exists, but kind of like, is it actually still suitable for what we're trying to achieve? The policy statement's just a real key document in what you're doing because the standard talks about, intended outcomes. Well, one of those intended outcomes is kind of embedded within your policy. I was at a client the other day, and the previous auditor quite rightly had raised there was a commitment to something in their policy, X, Y, Z, and there was just no evidence they were going anywhere near it, or even trying to. So it was like, well, okay, well, there's an issue, well, hang on. If it's not going to align with what we're trying to achieve, then that's all the more reason to have an effective review process that captures these things, that you're not going kind of, further down the line, getting further and further away from what you're actually trying to achieve. That's the thing, because it can be, well, hold on, we need to completely reshape this whole thing, because otherwise it's just going to be just a nonsense, and
Yeah,
that's
is
it's
our
important that we
policy
capture it.
wrong, or are we going in the wrong direction?
Exactly right, but it may be that you're going completely the right direction, but the policy is saying something different that you're never going to get near. Well, okay, well, let's change the policy then. It's not necessarily that we've got to carry on doing what we've always done, like we've already said, but it's there's nothing wrong. And if you've got an effective management review process that's considering the right things and making the right decisions, then that can impact like your policy, your objectives, the structure, the look and feel of like the business, the way that it works, the processes, and everything that sits around it. So yes, it is an important part. Yes, it's. I think it's probably. I mean, spoken about it just for the last 20 minutes or so. It's kind of, you realise kind of like how you get in the habit maybe as of looking at things and yeah, accepting it, but not necessarily kind of challenging it. And it's and I think that's, we're not there to, expose or trip people up, but it's certainly we're there to kind of, say, well, okay, what was the decisions here? What actually, what happened? We've all been in many, many meetings where we've come out and gone, well, I've no idea what that was all about.
No decisions
No, no
made.
one. Has anyone got to do anything? Well, I don't know, but we spoke about a load of stuff. And I think that's kind of where people, it devalues the process and maybe gets a bit frustrating. It's like, oh, another meeting, sit there, another hour of my life gone or whatever it may be. But doesn't need to be that way, certainly not. And we don't expect it. We don't expect that level of intense kind of focus during a meeting. But yeah, certainly that the process is reviewed and yeah, that it's happened.
So what about sort of technology? Do you see any sort of new technologies people using? I know I've sort of seen Power BI
Yeah,
being used or Data Studio like we use. Do you seeing that quite a bit yet or not?
I think I mean, people, I mean, obviously, there's kind of, if you like, dare I say, kind of the obvious things that have come about, certainly maybe since over the last sort of 4 or 5 years or so, of kind of like means of interacting, the idea of having to have everyone in a room together, if you want to call it that, if you can have a traditional meeting process. But if you're going to use a review process, I think, because the review is about, looking at data, looking at information, get information back. And I think, yeah, the way by means the means by which people, sorry, are capturing information and presenting it to the, senior top management is changing. Certainly, I think there's obviously even down to relatively kind of straightforward things. I know it's something that kind of that can be done. I know Google is very good at these things in terms of transcripts and things. Kind of just capturing conversations that otherwise would have been maybe lost. Kind of, it might be like, oh, we're talking all the time. We're having these things, but if there's a means of capturing that intelligently and reasonably accurately, that can be evidence of a review as well. It may just be, well, you know, use the technology that's out there, certainly for
Well, yeah,
sure.
we've used it where if
Yeah,
we have a
yeah,
meeting, Google Meet, and I know Teams does it, we don't use it, but it transcribes it and then it spits out a summary that basically that's the key points you spoke about and these are your
yeah,
actions.
definitely.
Brilliant.
Just that, yeah, that's it. So another one, just the client that we were at just only last week, Mike, and we was going through, and they said, well, we was talking about, it wasn't quite management review, but it was like participation consultation, but it was kind of embedded with the review process as well. And they have kind of like an all hands or like company teams meeting, and they said, "Oh, we've got all the recordings here. Did you want to see one?" I said, "No, that's okay, fair enough." And like that was more like health and safety bias, but they said we do a senior leadership one as well that's kind of captured. It doesn't necessarily need to be. I know we're going back to sort of meetings again, but the idea is that you can, if there's conversations being had, these were like every week they were having these, and it was kind of, well, okay, and they keep them all recorded, because the space is out there now. It's not like the old days when you had to save it all to on your disk somewhere. It's just out there held, isn't it? And they said, oh, would you want to see one? So okay, I had a little look for a couple of minutes, got an idea of the things they were talking about, and it just showed that there was a review process, and then it went on to talk about, well, okay, that's all well and good, but what happens when there's decisions and actions? Will they get held here? And it's just anything that's pertinent, keep things moving and rolling along. So for sure,
I suppose even
yeah,
WhatsApp, because we see a lot of
yeah,
people use WhatsApp
yeah,
nowadays, don't we? So
all the time, yeah,
yeah, they've got group chats in there where they're talking about resources, especially sort of construction.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
you reviewing it. We need this, need that. That's got to be done. Yeah, what went wrong here? It's all part of it, isn't it? Yeah.
Definitely, and I think it's the way that auditing's changed as well. Like I said earlier, I know when we started out with it many moons ago, and it was like your management review, and that's just what was presented, and that was it. Whereas now you have to kind of put a different sort of approach and style to the whole thing. You've got to be prepared to kind of go and ask, and if someone says they're doing something, well, it may not be on a piece of paper in front of you, but you've got to go out and see that it's happening, and evidence it that way around. It may not be. I know the standard says, documenting information of the results of the review process, but documentation doesn't mean necessarily, if you want to call it a piece of paper or like a Word document or whatever it may be, it can be, documentation can be in the form of like a system or some kind of, evidence that it's actually happening. It's that the idea that it's information that shows what's happening or that's a result of the process. So, yeah, yeah,
Brilliant.
so
Brilliant. Yeah, so I think in summary, don't just pay lip service to it, tick boxes and present it with minutes. Don't do it for our benefit. do it for your benefit, really.
100%, yeah. That's the same, and the same rules apply for kind of like nearly every clause in the standard. Obviously we need to see it happening, but the way that it's presented is it's down to you as a business. And make it effective and workable. If you look at what you're already doing and kind of maybe look at that one and kind of look, okay, we're already talking about that here. Well, do we need to talk about it again once a year? No, not necessarily. We'll just say, I'll tell the auditor that's when we do it. So yeah, made our job harder there, given all these things, but
I don't know. I like it when people think outside the box and come up with a different
yeah,
idea and makes me think a little bit and just kind of think, yeah, that works. It's yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, definitely cool,
Definitely.
brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. No, not at all. No. Yeah. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, brilliant, cool. Yeah, maybe we'll do another one on. I don't know. What was you saying earlier? What
That's
did you
just funny.
think?
The more you talk about it, the more you kind of think. But it's yeah, I think maybe like change or something like that, or kind of like even like the internal audit processes. It can be some of these things that are so maybe considered a bit kind of dry within the whole thing, but
Mm,
they're so important. I think people lose track of like the importance of like your policy statement, like the internal audit and the management review process. I think they become so kind of, oh, let's have a look at your management reviews and internal audits, but no actual, you don't actually sort of, they get a bit kind of, what's the word, a bit lost amongst all the chatter, don't they? It's just, oh, there's your management review. Yeah, okay, thank you very
tick.
much. And yeah, done that. And it's like, actually, yeah, and it's, it's a lesson for, it's not clients, it's not consultants, it's not auditors. It's just, I think everyone should become maybe a little bit kind of, not numb to it, but they're a little bit kind of, desensitized maybe.
Yeah,
If that's
yeah.
a better word, but yeah,
Needs a bit of
but yeah.
freshening up. Yeah, cool,
Yeah, that's
brilliant.
it. Let's jazz it up. Jazz it
Let's
up.
jazz it up. That's it. We like those words. Jazz it up. Yeah,
That's it.
cool,
Jazzy.
brilliant,
Jazzy. No worries.
cool. We'll catch
Good
you
stuff.
soon.
Yeah, cheers, Mike. Take care.